The alarm bells rang through the bridge of the UE's Retribution like the screams of dying stars. Admiral Jake Morrison gripped the armrest of his command chair as the massive warship shuddered out of hyperspace. Sparks flew from control panels, while crew members shouted damage reports across the dim red lighting. "Fusion Core 3 is critical," called out Chief Engineer Danny Walsh from his station. "We've got maybe 6 hours before complete failure." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. 30 years. 30 long years they had survived in the dark space between galaxies, running on hope and spare parts. The Retribution was the last of humanity's great warships, carrying 2,000 souls who refused to die quietly in the void. "Where are we?" Morrison asked his navigator. Lieutenant Amy Chun checked her instruments twice before answering. "Kepler system, sir. Edge of what used to be human space. Used to be." Morrison felt the familiar anger rise in his chest. The Galactic Council had driven them here 3 decades ago, claiming humanity was too dangerous, too violent to remain in civilized space. They had destroyed the human colonies, scattered the fleets, and forced the survivors to run into the endless dark. "Sir," called Tactical Officer Ben Carter, "I'm reading energy signatures from the 3rd planet. It looks like ... It looks like a human settlement." Morrison stood up fast. "That's impossible." The Council glassed all the human worlds. "The readings don't lie, Admiral. There are humans down there." Morrison stared at the main screen as it showed. A blue-green world spinning peacefully around its star. After 30 years of empty space and dead planets, seeing a living world felt like a miracle. But humans? How could any humans have survived the Council's cleansing? "Take us in," Morrison ordered, "but keep the weapons ready. This could be a trap." The Retribution limped toward the planet, its damaged engines struggling with each kilometer. Morrison watched the world grow larger on the screen. He could see cities, agricultural areas, and orbital stations. It was definitely inhabited, and the energy patterns matched human technology. "Incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "Put it through." The screen flickered and showed a woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore the simple clothes of a colonist, but her bearing showed strength. "Unknown vessel. This is Governor Kate Sullivan of New Austin Colony. Please identify yourself." Morrison stepped forward. "Governor Sullivan, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Retribution. We are human survivors from the Exile fleet." Kate's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Dear God, you're real. You're actually real. We need supplies." "And repairs," Morrison said. "Our fusion cores are failing." Of course. "Please, Admiral, dock at our orbital station. We have so much to tell you." 2 hours later, Morrison sat in the colony's meeting hall, listening to Kate Sullivan tell a story that made his blood run cold. Around the table sat other colony leaders, all humans who had somehow survived what the galaxy thought was complete extinction. "The Council called it the Great Purge," Kate said, her voice heavy with old pain. "They didn't just exile us, Admiral. They tried to kill every human in the galaxy. They hunted down colony ships, destroyed hidden settlements, murdered civilians who were just trying to survive." Morrison's fists clenched. "How many?" "Billions," answered Dr. Frank Hayes, the colony's chief medical officer. "We estimate they killed over 3 billion humans in the first 5 years after the exile. Entire worlds were sterilized. Children were killed in their schools. But some of us survived," said Carl Rodriguez, the head of the asteroid mining operation. "We hid in places they couldn't find. Dead systems, asteroid belts, the edges of nebulae. We've been living in fear for 30 years, always watching the skies for Council ships." Morrison felt something break inside him. The exile hadn't been punishment. It had been attempted genocide. The Council had tried to wipe humanity from existence, to erase them from history like they had never existed. Tell me about the other survivors, Morrison said quietly. Kate pulled up a star map. We've made contact with 17 hidden settlements, mining colonies and asteroid fields, research stations and dead systems, even a group of descendants from a prison transport that was lost during the original Exile. How many total? Maybe 50 million humans scattered across 100 light years. All of them hiding, all of them afraid, all of them angry. Morrison studied the map. 50 million survivors from a species that once numbered in the hundreds of billions. The Council had been thorough, but they had made one critical mistake. They had left survivors, and those survivors had spent 30 years in the dark, growing stronger and more determined. Admiral, Kate said carefully, what happened to the Exile fleet? We always hoped some of you survived. Morrison's voice turned. Hard, most didn't. Disease, equipment failures, resource shortages. We lost ship after ship in the first decade. The Retribution is the last of the heavy warships. We've been exploring the dark galaxies, looking for resources, looking for hope. And did you find any? Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We found something better than hope, Governor. We found purpose. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful colony. Children played in the streets below, their laughter carrying through the glass. These people had lived in terror for 3 decades, always watching for Council ships that would bring death from the stars. The Council thinks we're extinct, Morrison sighed. They think they succeeded in wiping out humanity. They've been celebrating our destruction for 30 years. What are you thinking, Admiral? Kate asked. Morrison turned back to face the group. His eyes held a cold fire that made them all lean back in their chairs. I'm thinking it's time to correct their mistake. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat nervously. Admiral, the Council has hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships. Even if we gathered every human survivor, we couldn't match their numbers. Numbers don't win wars, Doctor. Will does. And after 30 years in the void, after watching our people die, after living with the knowledge that they tried to murder every human child in the galaxy, I think our will is stronger than theirs. Carl Rodriguez leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? Morrison's smile grew wider and more dangerous. The Council wanted to erase humanity from the galaxy. I say we return the favor. The room fell silent. Outside, the children continued playing, unaware that their peaceful world was about to become the first stop in humanity's return to galactic civilization. But this wouldn't be a return as refugees or exiles begging for acceptance. This would be a return as conquerors. Morrison walked back to his chair and sat down. Tell me about the other survivor groups, Governor. I want to know about their capabilities, their resources, their weapons. We have 30 years of hiding to make up for, and the Council is about to learn what happens when you try to genocide the human race. Kate Sullivan looked around the table at her fellow colonists. She saw the same expression on all their faces that she felt in her own heart. After 30 years of fear, of hiding, of watching their people die in secret, they finally had hope again. But more than hope, they had something the Council had forgotten humans possessed. They had rage, and Admiral Jake Morrison, commander of the last human warship, was about to teach the galaxy why that rage should be feared above all else. 3 weeks after leaving New Austin Colony, the Retribution floated in the asteroid belt of the Hadley system. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge, watching his crew repair the fusion cores with parts donated by Governor Sullivan's people. The ship was stronger now, but Morrison's real focus was on the message playing on his personal screen. Admiral Morrison, this is Commander Lisa Park of the Void Walker Fleet. Kate Sullivan told us you were gathering the scattered tribes. We need to meet. Morrison had heard stories about the Void Walkers during his stay at New Austin. Descendants of a prison transport that had been lost during the original Exile, they had become the most feared pirates in the Outer Rim. The Council ships that ventured too far from their safe zones simply disappeared. Set course for the Titan Nebula, Morrison ordered. It's time to meet these ghosts. The journey took 4 days. As the Retribution entered the thick gas clouds of the nebula, Morrison felt like they were entering another world. The sensors could barely penetrate the swirling colors, and navigation became a matter of following ancient beacons left by the Void Walkers. Then the ships appeared. They came out of the gas clouds like sharks from dark water. Black hulls with no markings, engines that ran silent, weapons that could punch through armor plating like paper. Morrison counted 12 vessels, all different sizes, all moving with the perfect coordination of a pack hunt. "This is Commander Lisa Park," came the voice over the comm. "Welcome to the Void, Admiral. Follow us." The Void Walker base was hidden inside a hollow asteroid, invisible to outside sensors. As the Retribution docked, Morrison saw the truth of what 30 years in hiding had done to these humans. They moved like shadows, their eyes constantly watching for threats, their weapons always within reach. Lisa Park met him at the airlock. She was younger than Morrison had expected, maybe 40, with the lean build of someone who had grown up in zero gravity. Her dark hair was cut short, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. "Admiral," she said, extending her hand. "You have no idea how long we've waited for this day." She led him through corridors carved from solid rock. Morrison saw families living in small chambers, children who had never seen sunlight, workshops where weapons were built from salvaged Council technology. "How many people do you have here?" Morrison asked. "In this base?" "About 3,000. But we have 7 bases scattered through different nebulae. Total population is around 20,000. They entered a large chamber that served as a meeting hall. Other Void Walker captains were waiting, men and women who looked like they had been carved from the darkness of space itself. "Tell me about your operations," Morrison said. Lisa smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We hunt Council ships, supply convoys, patrol vessels, sometimes even military transports. We take their cargo, their weapons, their intelligence data. Then we make the ships disappear. How many, in 30 years? Over 800 vessels. The Council thinks it's equipment failures, navigation errors, accidents. They have no idea we exist." Morrison felt a cold satisfaction. While he had been exploring dead galaxies, these humans had been waging a secret war against their enemies. "What kind of intelligence do you gather?" Captain Rick Barnes, a man with scars covering half his face, stepped forward. "Fleet movements, supply routes, political information. We know which Council worlds are heavily defended and which ones are soft targets. We know their patrol schedules, their communication codes, their weaknesses." Lisa nodded. "Admiral, we've been preparing for this war for 3 decades. We know everything about how the Council operates." Morrison felt the pieces of his plan beginning to fall into place. "Show me your ships." The tour of the Void Walker fleet amazed Morrison. These weren't the crude raiders he had expected. The ships were masterpieces of stealth technology, built from salvaged materials, but engineered with 30 years of accumulated knowledge. They could slip through sensor nets, strike without warning, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. "We've learned things in the Void that the Council never imagined," Lisa explained as they walked through the engine room of her flagship. "How to mask energy signatures, how to move without disturbing space dust, how to communicate without being detected." "And your crews?" "Born and raised for this. Our children grow up learning to fly in zero gravity, to fight in vacuum, to live on what they can take from the enemy. They're not like the humans the Council remembers." Morrison thought about the implications. The Council had exiled humanity, thinking they were banishing a civilized species to slow death in the Void. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. Humans adapted to survive anywhere, and 30 years of exile had turned them into perfect predators. Their next stop was the mining colony in the Cerberus asteroid field. Morrison brought Lisa and several of her captains with him, building his growing fleet one contact at a time. Carl Rodriguez met them at the docking port of Mining Station Alpha. Behind him stood dozens of workers, their bodies adapted to life. In low gravity, their hands calloused from years of working with mining equipment. "Admiral Morrison," Carl said, "welcome to our little piece of hell." The mining operation was massive. Hollowed-out asteroids served as processing centers, while smaller rocks were broken apart by industrial lasers and gravity manipulators. Morrison watched crews working in vacuum suits, moving multi-ton chunks of metal like they weighed nothing. "How much material do you process?" Morrison asked. "Enough to supply every hidden human settlement in this sector," Carl replied. "Rare metals, fuel, raw materials for ship construction. We've been stockpiling for years." Lisa Park studied the mining equipment with professional interest. Those industrial lasers could cut through ship armor. Carl grinned. "Could?" "Admiral, we've tested them on derelict council vessels. They slice through dreadnought plating like it's paper. And the gravity manipulators we use for moving asteroids? They can crush a frigate into a ball of scrap metal." Morrison felt his excitement growing. He wasn't just gathering refugees. He was assembling an army equipped with weapons the Council had never faced before. "Show me your capabilities," Morrison said. The demonstration took place in an empty section of the asteroid field. Carl's crews used their mining equipment to systematically destroy a derelict Council destroyer that had been drifting in space for decades. The industrial lasers carved through the hull in seconds, while gravity manipulators twisted the metal framework into impossible shapes. "Dear God," whispered one of Lisa's captains. "They're not miners, they're shipbreakers." Carl nodded proudly. 30 years of anger makes for creative engineering, Admiral. We've been dreaming of the day we could use these tools on active Council ships. Morrison's next contact came through an encrypted message from the research station hidden in the Corona system. Dr. Elena Hayes, the daughter of Frank Hayes from New Austin Colony, had been working on projects that made Morrison's blood run cold. The research station was built inside a dead planet, its surface blasted clean by an ancient solar flare. The facility stretched for kilometers through underground tunnels, protected from radiation and hidden from sensors. Elena met them at the main laboratory. She was young, maybe 30, but her eyes held the intensity of someone who had spent years pushing the boundaries of science. "Admiral Morrison," she said, "I hope you're prepared for what I'm about to show you." She led them through laboratories filled with equipment Morrison didn't recognize. Scientists worked on projects that seemed to blur the line between human and machine, between biology and technology. During the Exile, we were cut off from the ethical oversight committees, the safety regulations, the moral guidelines that limited human science, Elena explained. We've had 30 years to explore technologies that the Council banned as too dangerous. They stopped at a window overlooking a testing chamber. Inside, Morrison watched a human volunteer interfacing directly with a computer system, his neural patterns displayed on multiple screens. "Neural interface technology," Elena said. "Direct human AI integration. The subject can control multiple ship systems simultaneously, process data at superhuman speeds, coordinate with other interfaced humans in perfect unity." Lisa Park stared through the window. "How many people can do this?" "We've tested it on over 500 volunteers. The success rate is 90%. We can create ship crews that operate with perfect coordination, fighter pilots who react faster than any alien reflexes, strategists who can process battlefield data in real time." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. The Council had exiled humanity, thinking they were too dangerous in their natural state. They had no idea what 30 years of unrestricted human innovation could produce. "There's more," Elena said quietly. "Genetic modifications, enhanced reflexes, improved strength and endurance. "We've been preparing for war, Admiral. Not just to survive it, but to win it completely." As Morrison toured the final laboratory, he realized that his plan needed to be bigger than simple revenge. The humans hiding in the void hadn't just survived their attempted genocide. They had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before, the Council thought. They had exiled a beaten species to die in the dark. Instead, they had created their own destroyers, and now those destroyers were ready to come home. Admiral Morrison stood in the war room aboard the Retribution, studying the holographic display of Zarian Prime. The Vorthek mining facility hung in space like a metal spider, its legs stretched out to grab asteroids rich with rare metals. Defense. Platforms surrounded it like angry hornets, bristling with weapons and shields. 67 ships on patrol, reported Ben Carter, studying the intelligence data Lisa Park's people had gathered. 18 heavy cruisers, 32 destroyers, and 17 support vessels, plus the orbital defense platforms. And our forces? Morrison asked. Lisa Park smiled coldly from her position at the tactical display. 12 Void Walker ships, the Retribution, and 43 mining vessels from Carl's operation. On paper, we're outnumbered almost 2-1. Good, Morrison said. The other officers looked at him strangely. If this was easy, it wouldn't send the right message. Morrison had chosen Zarian Prime carefully. The mining facility processed rare elements used in Council weapons and shield technology. Destroying it would hurt their military production. But more importantly, it would announce to the galaxy that humanity had returned from the dead. Attack fleet assembled in the shadow of a dead moon, 40 light hours from their target. Morrison watched his crews make final preparations. The mining ships looked harmless enough, but he knew they carried industrial equipment that could crack planets. The Void Walker vessels were nearly invisible even to his own sensors. All ships. Report ready, Lisa announced. Morrison activated the fleet-wide communication system. 30 years ago, the Galactic Council tried to erase us from existence. They burned our worlds, murdered our children, and drove us into the void to die forgotten. Today, we remind them that humanity does not die quietly. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. These were the children and grandchildren of the Exile fleet, raised on stories of loss and dreams of return. Zarian Prime will be the first to pay for what they did to us, but it will not be the last. Today we begin the reckoning. Today we make them remember why they feared us in the first place. The fleet moved toward Zarian Prime in complete silence. The Void Walker ships led the way, their stealth technology hiding the entire force from enemy sensors. Morrison felt the familiar calm that came before battle, but underneath it burned a cold fire that had been growing for 30 years. "Contact in 10 minutes, reported Amy Chun from her navigation station. Morrison turned to Dr. Elena Hayes, who had joined them for this first strike. "Are your people ready?" Elena nodded, her hand resting on the neural interface device at her temple. 20 volunteers with full neural integration. They'll coordinate our fire control and targeting systems within human precision. The first sign of trouble for the Vorthak defenders came when their patrol ships started disappearing. The Void Walker vessels struck like ghosts, emerging from empty space to destroy enemy vessels before vanishing again. By the time the base commander realized he was under attack, 6 patrol ships had been vaporized without sending a single distress signal. "Red alert! All ships converge on the mining facility." The Vorthek commander's voice crackled over the intercepted communications. That was exactly what Morrison wanted. He watched the enemy fleet rush toward the central facility, clustering together for mutual protection. They had no idea they were walking into a trap designed by humans who had spent 30 years planning this moment. The mining ships emerged from hyperspace directly above the enemy formation. To the Vorthek defenders, they looked like slow, harmless cargo vessels that had made a navigation error. The aliens barely spared them a glance as they focused on hunting the invisible. Attackers. Carl Rodriguez's voice came over the com from the lead mining ship. Admiral, we have clear shots on their entire fleet. Light them up, Morrison ordered. The space around Zarian Prime exploded into chaos. Industrial mining lasers, designed to cut through asteroid cores, sliced through the hulls of Vorthak warships like knives through paper. The aliens' shields, built to stop normal weapons, offered no protection against tools, designed to carve up planets, but it was the gravity manipulators that truly horrified the enemy. The same devices used to move asteroids reached out with invisible hands to grab Vorthak ships. Morrison watched through his tactical display as a heavy cruiser was slowly crushed into a ball of twisted metal, its crew screaming over open channels as their ship compacted around them. "My God," whispered Ben Carter. "They're not fighting. They're being processed." The Vorthak fleet tried to return fire, but their weapons couldn't lock onto targets that moved like they were part of the industrial equipment. Carl's miners had spent decades learning to work in three-dimensional space with perfect coordination. Now they applied those same skills to warfare. Elena Hayes stood at her station, her neural interface glowing softly as she coordinated with the other enhanced humans throughout the fleet. Morrison watched in amazement as their weapon systems fired with impossible accuracy, every shot perfectly timed and placed. "Neural integration is working perfectly," Elena reported, her voice strangely calm. "We're processing targeting data faster than their computers can calculate firing solutions." The battle turned into a massacre. Vorthak ships exploded or were crushed by gravity manipulators, while the human fleet suffered minimal damage. The aliens had trained to fight other civilized species with similar technology and tactics. They had no defense against humans who had spent 30 years developing new ways to kill. The orbital defense platforms tried to cover the fleeing enemy ships, but Morrison had saved the best for last. The Retribution emerged from stealth directly. Above the mining facility, her massive guns trained on the command center. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the human fleet," he broadcast on all frequencies. "To the Vorthak commander of Zarian Prime, 30 years ago, your people participated in the attempted genocide of the human race. Today, you pay the price." The enemy commander's face appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features twisted. "With fear and rage, you're supposed to be extinct. The Council destroyed all human colonies." Morrison smiled, and it was a terrible expression. "The Council tried. They failed. We are the survivors of your great purge, come back from the dead to return the favor. What do you want?" The Vorthak demanded. "Justice," Morrison replied. "And a message delivered to your superiors." The Retribution's main guns fired once. The mining facility's command center vaporized in a ball of plasma. Secondary explosions rippled through the structure as safety systems failed and storage tanks ruptured. Within minutes, the massive facility was breaking apart, its pieces falling toward the planet below. But Morrison wasn't finished. As the surviving Vorthak ships tried to escape, he gave them something that would haunt their dreams forever. The human fleet broadcast recordings from the destroyed human colonies, images of children killed in their schools, families burned in their homes, entire cities reduced to glass and ash. "Remember these faces," Morrison's voice followed the fleeing ships. "Remember these names. For every human child you murdered, we will take 10 of yours. For every world you burned, we will glass 20 of yours. This is not war. This is extermination." The psychological effect was immediate. Vorthak crews broke under the weight of seeing the victims of their great purge. Some ships stopped fleeing and simply drifted in space, their crews overcome by the horror of what they had helped accomplish. Others broadcast surrender messages, begging for mercy they had never shown human civilians. Morrison gave them the same mercy the Council had shown humanity 30 years ago. None. The few enemy ships that escaped carried Morrison's message back to Council space. Within hours, the recordings from Zarian Prime were being analyzed in government chambers across a dozen worlds. The impossible had happened. Humanity had returned from extinction, and their first act was to demonstrate that they had become something far worse than what the Council had originally feared. On Nexus Prime, the Council capital world, emergency sessions were called as politicians tried to understand what they were facing. The reports seemed impossible. Industrial equipment used as weapons, ships that could disappear and reappear at will. Humans with enhanced abilities working in perfect coordination. Chancellor Vex of the Vorthek Empire studied the battle recordings. For the 100th time, the human fleet had destroyed a heavily fortified facility with contemptuous ease, suffering almost no casualties in return. More frightening was their obvious preparation and organization. This wasn't a desperate band of survivors. This was a military force that had been planning and training for decades. How many of them are there? Vex asked his intelligence chief, unknown Chancellor. Our best estimates put human survivors at maybe a few million scattered across the outer rim, but if they can fight like this... Vex didn't need the sentence finished. If humanity had survived in significant numbers, if they had spent 30 years preparing for war instead of dying quietly, then the Council faced a threat unlike anything in galactic history. The humans weren't trying to reclaim their place in galactic civilization. They were coming to destroy it completely, and after seeing what they had become in Exile, Vex wondered if anyone could stop them. The message reached every corner of Council space within 72 hours. Admiral Morrison's declaration of war spread through communication networks like a virus, carrying with it the recordings from Zarian Prime across hundreds of worlds. Alien civilians watched in horror as human industrial equipment tore apart warships and mining lasers carved through military shields like they were made of paper. Morrison stood in the command center of the Retribution, now orbiting the captured mining facility. His fleet had grown to over 200 ships as hidden human settlements revealed themselves throughout the outer rim. Word of the victory at Zarian Prime had reached every survivor colony, and they were coming out of hiding to join the war. Report from Forge Prime, announced Communications Officer Lisa Park. Ryan Brooks and his infiltration team have successfully disabled the planetary defense grid. The world is ready for liberation, Morrison smiled coldly. Forge Prime was one of the Council's largest weapons manufacturing centers, producing the energy cannons and shield generators that equip their fleets. More importantly, it was defended by over 300 ships and orbital platforms that the Council considered impregnable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The human fleet approached Forge Prime in 3 waves. The first wave consisted of Void Walker ships, invisible to enemy sensors, and carrying infiltration teams led by engineer Ryan Brooks. The second wave was the mining vessels, disguised as a merchant convoy seeking trade. The third wave remained, hidden in hyperspace, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ryan Brooks had spent 2 weeks on Forge Prime, posing as a maintenance worker for the Orbital Defense Network. His team of 12 humans had used their enhanced reflexes and neural interfaces to plant explosives throughout the shield generators and weapon control systems. The Council security forces never suspected that the extinct human race was walking among them. All charges are in place, Ryan reported through a coded transmission. Defense grid will go down in 60 seconds. Morrison watched the tactical display as Ryan's sabotage took effect. One by one, the orbital defense platforms went dark. Shield generators exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Weapon systems that had protected Forge Prime for decades simply stopped working. The planet's defenders panicked. Admiral Zek of the Vorthik Third Fleet demanded explanations from his technical staff, but they had no answers. The defense network was simply failing for no apparent reason. Emergency protocols activated, Zek ordered. All ships converge on the planet. Prepare for enemy attack. That was exactly what Morrison had been waiting for. As the enemy fleet clustered around Forge Prime to protect the weapons factories, the mining ships dropped their disguises and revealed their true nature. Carl. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the cum from his flagship. All mining vessels begin excavation procedures. Target designation, enemy fleet. The space around Forge Prime became a killing field. Industrial lasers reached out across impossible distances to slice enemy ships in half. Gravity manipulators grabbed entire squadrons of fighters and crushed them into balls of scrap metal. The weapons designed to break apart asteroids treated enemy warships like pebbles. But this time, the Council forces were ready for human tactics. Admiral Zek had studied the recordings from Zarian Prime and developed countermeasures for the mining equipment. His ships spread out to avoid the gravity manipulators and used long-range missiles to stay away from the industrial lasers. There. Adapting, reported Ben Carter from his tactical station. Enemy forces are maintaining distance and using coordinated missile strikes. Morrison nodded. He had expected this. The Council wasn't stupid, just unprepared. They would learn to fight against human industrial weapons. But Morrison had other surprises ready. Signal the third wave, Morrison ordered. Time for them to see what we really learned in Exile. The human heavy fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly above the enemy formation. But these weren't the converted mining ships or stealthy raiders the Council had faced before. These were warships built during 30 years of exile, designed by humans who had studied every weakness in Council military technology. The UE's Vengeance led the attack, its hull gleaming with armor plating made from materials found in dead galaxies. Behind it came 50 more ships of similar design, each one a fusion of human engineering and technologies. The Council had banned as too dangerous. Morrison opened a channel to the enemy fleet. Admiral Zek, I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Stellar Republic. You have two choices: surrender unconditionally or watch your fleet die around you. Zek's reptilian face appeared on the main screen, his eyes wide with fear, but his voice steady. The Vorthic Empire does not surrender to extinct species. Then you will join them in extinction, Morrison replied. The battle that followed showed the galaxy what humanity had become in exile. The human warships moved with perfect coordination, their crews enhanced with neural interfaces that allowed them to react faster than any alien reflexes. Their weapons fired with impossible accuracy, guided by AI systems that had learned to predict enemy movements before they were made. Dr. Elena Hayes stood at her neural interface station, her consciousness linked with 40 other enhanced humans throughout the fleet. Together, they processed tactical data at superhuman speeds, identifying weaknesses in enemy formations and exploiting them with ruthless efficiency. Target the command ship, Elena announced, her voice strangely calm as her enhanced mind calculated. Firing solutions. Weak point identified in their shield matrix. The Vengeance's main gun spoke once. Admiral Zek's flagship exploded in a ball of plasma, taking the enemy fleet's command structure with it. Without their admiral's coordination, the Vorthic ships began to panic and scatter. Morrison watched the enemy retreat with cold satisfaction, but he wasn't finished with them yet. As the surviving Council ships fled toward the edge of the system, he gave them a gift that would haunt their dreams forever. Begin the memorial broadcast, Morrison ordered. Across all communication frequencies, the human fleet began transmitting the names and faces of every human killed in the Great Purge. Billions of names scrolled across screens while images of destroyed colonies played in endless loops. The voices of human children killed in their schools echoed through space, followed by the testimonies of survivors who had watched their families burn. The psychological warfare worked better than any weapon. Vorthic crews who had participated In the original genocide broke down as they were forced to confront the faces of their victims. Some ships stopped fleeing entirely, their crews overcome by guilt and horror, but Morrison had saved the worst for last. As the final enemy ships reached the system's edge, he broadcast one final message. "These are the faces of the humans you tried to erase from existence." Morrison's voice followed the fleeing ships. "Remember them. Because for every name on this list, we will take 10 of yours. Your children will pay for their crimes. Your worlds will burn as ours burned. And when the galaxy forgets that your species ever existed, we will consider our debt paid." The effect was immediate and devastating. Within hours, recordings of the battle and Morrison's message had reached every corner of Council space. Panic spread through alien populations as they realized that humanity hadn't just survived their attempted genocide, but had become something far worse than what they had originally feared. On the insectoid world of Hive Prime, Queen Zack convened an emergency session of the Zephyrian Collective. The recordings from Forge Prime played on massive screens while her advisors buzzed with nervous energy. "How is this possible?" Queen Zack demanded. "Our intelligence reports indicated complete human extinction." "The reports were wrong, Your Majesty," replied Intelligence Director Zik. "Humanity survived in numbers we never imagined. Worse, they spent 30 years preparing for this war." Queen Zack studied the tactical analysis of the human fleet. Their ships were faster, their weapons more accurate, their crews perfectly coordinated. Most terrifying was their obvious technological advancement. The humans had developed capabilities that bordered on impossible. "What do they want?" Queen Zack asked. "Revenge, Your Majesty. Complete and total revenge for the Great Purge." Queen Zack felt something she had never experienced before in her long life: fear. The Zephyrian Collective had participated in humanity's exile, believing they were removing a dangerous species from galactic civilization. Now that species had returned as something far more dangerous than they had ever been. "Open communications with the human fleet," Queen Zack ordered. "Perhaps we can negotiate." The response came 12 hours later. Admiral Morrison appeared on the main screen of the Collective's command center, his human features calm, but his eyes holding the cold fire of absolute determination. "Your Majesty," Morrison said with mock politeness, "I understand you wish to discuss terms." "Yes, Queen," Zack replied. "The Zephyrian Collective is prepared to offer reparations for past actions. We can coexist peacefully." Morrison's smile was terrifying in its complete lack of warmth. "Your Majesty, 30 years ago, your people participated in the attempted genocide of the human race. You burned our worlds, murdered our children, and tried to erase us from history. Did you offer coexistence to the human families you slaughtered?" The siege of Korath lasted 17 days. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the last Vorthak stronghold burned beneath a rain of human fire. The homeworld of the Reptilian Empire, once the proud capital of a species that had ruled dozens of star systems, was now a broken shell of what it had been. Hundreds of human ships surrounded the planet like a metal storm cloud. Mining vessels turned their industrial equipment on the surface, carving deep scars into continents. Void Walker ships hunted down any vessel trying to escape, while the heavy warship systematically destroyed orbital defenses that had protected Korath for centuries. "Chancellor Vex is requesting communication," reported Lisa Park from her station. Morrison nodded. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to show the interior of the Vorthak government bunker. Chancellor Vex looked older than his years, his scales dulled and his eyes holding the hollow look of complete defeat. Behind him, Morrison could see other Vorthak officials watching with the same broken expression. "Admiral Morrison," Vex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We surrender, unconditionally." Morrison studied the alien leader who had helped orchestrate humanity's exile 30 years ago. Tell me, Chancellor, do you remember the human colonies you destroyed? The children you murdered? The families you burned? Vex's head dropped. Yes. Good, because I want you to remember their faces when I give you the same choice you gave them. Morrison's voice turned cold as deep space. Exile or extinction? The words hit Vex like a physical blow. For 30 years, the Vorthik had believed humanity was extinct, their genocide successful and complete. Now the survivors were offering the same fate to their tormentors. You want us to leave Council space? Vex asked. I want you gone from this galaxy, Morrison replied. You have 72 hours to gather whatever you can carry and leave. Any Vorthik ships found in Council space after that deadline will be destroyed without warning. Vex looked around at his advisors, seeing the same helplessness in their eyes that human leaders had felt 3 decades ago. And if we refuse? Morrison gestured toward the burning planet visible through the bunker's viewports. Then your species joins the humans you tried to murder. Extinction is extinction, Chancellor. The only difference is how quickly it happens. The choice was no choice at all. Within 48 hours, massive Vorthik evacuation fleets were fleeing toward the Galactic Rim, carrying millions of refugees into the same dark void where humanity had been forced to survive. Morrison watched them go with cold satisfaction, knowing they would face the same struggles and losses that had claimed so many human lives, but the Vorthik were only the beginning. 3 months later, Morrison stood in the council chamber of New Earth, humanity's new capital world. The planet had been terraformed in the heart of what was once Council space, its blue skies and green continents a monument to human determination. Around the massive table sat the leaders of the new galactic order. Governor Kate Sullivan now served as president of the Human Stellar Republic, her colony experience making her perfect for managing civilian populations. Dr. Elena Hayes had become the Director of Advanced Sciences, overseeing the integration of Exile technologies into human civilization. Carl Rodriguez commanded the industrial cores, turning mining equipment into the backbone of human infrastructure. Status report, Morrison requested, settling into his chair as Admiral of the Human Defense Forces. Kate activated the holographic display showing the galaxy. Large sections were now colored blue for human-controlled space, while other areas showed the scattered remnants of former Council species. 73 former Council worlds have requested protection under human authority, Kate reported. The Andronian Republic has offered full integration into the Human Stellar Republic. The Cetian Federation is providing industrial support in exchange for defense guarantees. Morrison nodded. Not all alien species had participated in humanity's exile. Some had opposed it, others had remained neutral, and many had been conquered by the Council against their will. These species now looked to humanity for protection against the chaos that followed the Council's collapse. What about resistance movements? Morrison asked. Lisa Park, now commanding human intelligence operations, leaned forward. The Zephyrian Collective is still fighting in the Outer Rim systems. Queen Zack has gathered the survivors of 12 insectoid worlds and is attempting to rebuild their fleet. Attempting, Morrison repeated. Success rate? Near zero. Every time they try to establish a base or construction facility, our deep space scouts find them. The Void Walker fleets make sure they never stay hidden for long. Morrison smiled. The same stealth technology that had allowed humanity to survive in exile now hunted their former persecutors to the dark spaces between stars. The roles had completely reversed, and the aliens were learning what it meant to live in constant fear of discovery. Sir, Elena Hayes spoke up from her position across the table. We've received an interesting communication from the Galactic Remnant Council. They're requesting a formal meeting to discuss peace terms. Morrison raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Remnant Council was what remained of the original Council after humanity's return. A dozen species that had managed to maintain some territorial integrity, led by survivors who claimed they had opposed the Great Purge. What kind of peace terms? Morrison asked. Elena activated a data pad. Recognition of human sovereignty over former council space, reparations for exile damages, and establishment of formal diplomatic relations. They're also offering to turn over any remaining records of human colony locations and survivor populations. The room fell silent. Morrison could see his advisors waiting for his decision. For 30 years, they had dreamed of this moment when their enemies would come begging for mercy. Now it was here, and the choice was his to make. Morrison stood and walked to the window overlooking New Earth's capital city. Below him, human children played in parks while alien refugees worked alongside human colonists to build new lives. The city was a mixture of species and cultures, united under human protection. "Set up the meeting," Morrison said finally. "But make our terms clear. This isn't a negotiation between equals. This is the new galactic order, accepting the surrender of the old one." The meeting took place 1 month later aboard a neutral space station in the buffer zone between human space and the remnant territories. Morrison arrived with a small delegation, while the aliens brought representatives from every surviving council species. The alien delegates looked nervous as Morrison entered the conference room. They had seen the recordings of human military capabilities, watched their fleets destroy council strongholds with contemptuous ease, and witnessed the exile of the Vorthek Empire. They knew they were dealing with a force that could erase them from existence if it chose to. "Admiral Morrison," said Ambassador Vake of the Andronian Republic, speaking for the Remnant Council, "we come seeking peace between our peoples." Morrison took his seat at the head of the table. Peace, an interesting word from species that tried to genocide mine. "Not all of us participated in the Great Purge," Vec protested. "Some of us opposed the exile from the beginning. And yet you did nothing to stop it," Morrison replied. "You watched as billions of humans died and remained silent. Complicity through inaction is still complicity." The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Morrison let the silence stretch before continuing. "But humanity is not interested in endless war. We've proven our point. The galaxy knows what happens to those who try to destroy us. Now we're prepared to discuss the future." Ambassador Vec leaned forward eagerly. "What are your terms?" Morrison activated a holographic display showing the new galactic map. "Humanity will govern the core systems of former council space. Refugee populations from the exile will be relocated to suitable worlds. Alien species that wish to remain will do so under human authority, with full rights and protections." "And those who don't wish to remain?" asked another delegate. "Free to leave, provided they never return," Morrison said simply. "The galaxy is large enough for everyone, but humanity will never again allow itself to be vulnerable to genocide." The negotiations continued for weeks, but the outcome was never in doubt. The alien delegates could accept human terms, or face the same fate as the Vorthek Empire. Most chose integration over extinction. 6 months later, Morrison stood on the Phaeocum observation deck of the New Earth orbital station, watching construction ships build the monument that would commemorate humanity's return. The massive structure would be visible from space, a reminder to future generations of the price of trying to erase the human species. "Any regrets?" Kate Sullivan asked, joining him at the viewport. Morrison considered the question. Billions of aliens had died in humanity's return. Entire species had been exiled or scattered to the galactic winds. The old order had been completely destroyed and replaced with human dominance. "No," Morrison said finally. "They chose this path when they decided we were too dangerous to exist. We simply proved them right." Kate nodded, understanding. "And now?" Morrison looked out at the ships coming and going from New Earth's orbital facilities. Human vessels mixed with alien ships flying under human flags.